My beloved child. Today, something has happened that your soulmate never believed would become real. For the first time, they are no longer afraid of being alone. They are afraid of losing you forever. The tears they tried to hide have finally broken free, because one painful realization has completely changed their heart. They can no longer convince themselves that there will always be another chance, another tomorrow, another opportunity to make things right. The fear of never seeing you again has become stronger than every excuse they once held on to. Don't skip. Because what is unfolding behind the scenes is far greater than you can imagine. Listen carefully. Your soulmate has spent far longer than anyone realizes carrying emotions they never knew how to express. They convinced themselves that staying silent was safer than risking rejection. Every time they thought about reaching out, fear whispered that the timing was wrong. Every time they wanted to fight for this connection, pride quietly held them back. They believed life would somehow wait until they were emotionally ready. But destiny never promises endless chances, and recently something happened that completely shattered that illusion. It began with what seemed like an ordinary moment. They overheard a conversation, noticed something unexpected, or simply found themselves sitting alone with memories they had spent years trying to avoid. For reasons they still cannot explain, your name entered their mind with unusual force. Memories they believed had faded suddenly became crystal clear. They remembered the kindness you showed when nobody else understood them. They remembered the patience you carried during moments when they were confused. They remembered every silent sacrifice you made without demanding recognition. One memory became another. Then another. Until the weight of those moments became impossible to escape. As these memories continued to return, a frightening thought quietly settled into their heart. What if you were no longer waiting? What if the person who once believed in them had finally chosen peace over uncertainty? What if someone else one day received the love they had been too afraid to accept? That single question refused to leave their mind. No matter how much they distracted themselves with work, conversations, or daily responsibilities, it continued following them like a shadow that would not disappear. Don't skip. Because this is where everything began to change. For the first time in a very long while, your soulmate allowed themselves to feel the full weight of their own choices. They stopped blaming circumstances. They stopped blaming distance. They even stopped blaming the people around them. Instead, they looked directly at the decisions they had made and realized how many opportunities had quietly slipped away. Every delayed message. Every unspoken truth. Every moment they believed could wait until tomorrow suddenly returned with painful clarity. Regret has a way of arriving all at once, and when it does, it becomes impossible to silence. That night, sleep refused to come. They turned over every memory, wondering how life might have been different if they had spoken honestly sooner. Questions filled their heart that had never troubled them before. They wondered whether you still thought about them. They wondered if your heart had finally healed without them. Most of all, they wondered whether heaven had already closed the door they once believed would remain open forever. The possibility that they had truly lost you became heavier than anything they had ever carried before. As the hours passed, tears quietly began to fall. Not because someone had hurt them in that moment, but because they finally understood the pain they had unknowingly caused. They realized that while they were waiting for the perfect time, you had been carrying uncertainty, silence, and unanswered questions. That realization broke something inside them. The tears were not dramatic. They were honest. They came from a place that had remained locked for far too long, and once those emotions were released, they could no longer pretend that everything was fine. Meanwhile, heaven has been working in ways neither of you can yet fully see. Small events that appear unrelated are slowly moving into place. People are beginning to notice changes in your soulmate's behavior. Those closest to them can sense that something has shifted, even if they cannot explain what it is. They have become quieter, more thoughtful, less interested in pretending everything is normal. Inside, a battle is taking place between fear and faith, between regret and hope. And for the first time, hope is beginning to win. But just when your soulmate finally gathered the courage to consider making the move they should have made long ago, someone unexpectedly entered the situation with information that neither of you saw coming. Don't skip. Because what that person revealed next would completely change the direction of this story. They stood there in complete silence, unable to speak. The person in front of them was not someone they had expected to meet that day, yet the expression on that person's face immediately made it clear that this was no ordinary conversation. Without wasting a single moment, they quietly said, "There is something you deserve to know before you make your next decision." Those words echoed through your soulmate's heart with unusual weight. They felt as though destiny itself had arranged this unexpected meeting, and every instinct told them to listen until the very end. The conversation that followed became impossible to forget. One truth after another slowly came into the light. Your soulmate discovered that several misunderstandings they had accepted as facts were never the complete story. There had been moments when messages never reached the right person. There had been opportunities that quietly disappeared because someone else interfered. There had even been times when fear, assumptions, and outside opinion spoke louder than the genuine connection both of you shared. As each hidden piece came together, they realized how easily a beautiful bond can be damaged when silence replaces honesty. Don't skip. Because what happened next left your soulmate completely overwhelmed. As they replayed every memory with this new understanding, their heart became heavier than ever before. They could no longer blame fate for everything that had happened. They began recognizing the moments when they had ignored their own intuition. Deep inside, they had always felt that something about the separation never made complete sense, but instead of searching for the truth, they accepted the easiest explanation and continued walking away. Now that decision haunted them with every passing minute. That evening they returned home carrying emotions they could no longer hide. Familiar rooms suddenly felt empty. Every quiet corner reminded them of the future they once imagined with you. They sat alone, holding their thoughts together as long as they could, but eventually the pain became stronger than their pride. Tears filled their eyes once again, not because they were weak, but because they finally understood how close they had come to losing someone heaven had placed in their life for a reason. For the first time, they whispered your name without fear.
They admitted to themselves that no achievement, no distraction, and no new beginning had ever filled the space you left behind. They had tried convincing themselves that time would erase everything, yet time had only made your absence more noticeable. Every day without you had quietly added another layer of regret until their heart could no longer carry it. Meanwhile, something unexpected was also beginning to happen on your side of this story. Without knowing why, your spirit had started sensing a strange emotional shift. There were moments when your heart suddenly became restless for no visible reason. Certain memories appeared out of nowhere. Familiar dreams began returning after being absent for so long. These were not random moments. The invisible connection between two hearts was slowly awakening again, preparing both of you for a truth that neither of you could avoid much longer. Don't skip. Because heaven often begins restoring broken paths long before anyone can see them with natural eyes. Late that night, your soulmate made a decision they had delayed for far too long. They promised themselves that if even one genuine opportunity still remained, they would no longer allow fear to control them. They would search for answers instead of assumptions. They would choose honesty instead of silence. They would finally fight for the connection they once believed would always be waiting. But just as they reached for the one thing that could bring them closer to you, they discovered something that made their entire heart stop. Someone had already taken the first step. And the message waiting for them contained a truth they never expected to read. The moment they saw that message, every thought inside their mind came to a complete stop. Their hands began to tremble as they read the first few words over and over again, almost unable to believe what they were seeing. It was not a message filled with anger or blame. It was something far more powerful. It revealed that the story they had believed for so long was incomplete, and the truth had been quietly waiting for the right moment to come into the light. They sat down without saying a single word. Every sentence pulled them deeper into memories they had tried so hard to forget. They remembered the moments when you stood by them without asking for anything in return. They remembered the times you chose understanding instead of arguments, patience instead of pressure, and hope instead of giving up. Suddenly, they realized that while they had been questioning your feelings, you had never truly stopped caring. The painful distance between both of you had not been created by a lack of love. It had been built little by little through fear, silence, and misunderstandings that nobody had the courage to correct. Don't skip. Because this was the moment everything inside your soulmate began to change forever. As the night grew quieter, they could no longer hide from their own heart. They looked at old memories with completely different eyes. Things they once ignored suddenly became meaningful. Small acts of kindness that seemed ordinary at the time now felt priceless. They began asking themselves why they had waited so long to appreciate someone who had always wished them well. Regret settled deeper into their heart, not because the past could not be changed, but because they finally understood how precious this connection had always been. For hours, they wrestled with one difficult question. If I still have one chance, will they even want to hear from me? That question frightened them more than anything else. The fear of rejection was real, yet the fear of spending the rest of their life wondering what if was even greater. For the first time, they realized that remaining silent would hurt far more than speaking honestly. Meanwhile, unseen doors were quietly beginning to open. People who had once remained silent were starting to speak. Circumstances that had blocked this connection were slowly losing their power. Even those who had misunderstood your place in your soulmate's life were beginning to notice how deeply your absence had affected them. One by one, the walls that had stood between both of you for so long were beginning to crack. Don't skip. Because heaven often changes a story when both hearts are finally ready to face the truth. Before the sun rose, your soulmate made a promise they had never been brave enough to make before. They would stop waiting for the perfect moment. They would stop allowing fear to write the next chapter of their life. No matter how difficult it became, they would search for the truth, accept responsibility for their mistakes, and follow the path their heart had been pointing toward all along. But just as they prepared to take that first courageous step, someone unexpectedly knocked on their door. The person standing outside carried something in their hands that had been hidden for years. And what was inside would reveal a secret capable of changing everything you both believed about your separation. The knock echoed through the house with a strange sense of urgency. Your soulmate hesitated for a moment before opening the door. Standing there was someone they had not seen in a very long time. There were no smiles, no unnecessary words, only a quiet expression that seemed to carry years of hidden emotions. In their hands was a small envelope, worn by time, its edges slightly faded. Before your soulmate could ask a single question, the visitor softly said, "This should have reached you long ago. I can't keep this hidden anymore." Those words immediately changed the atmosphere. Your soulmate accepted the envelope with trembling hands. Something deep inside told them that whatever was waiting inside those folded pages would answer questions that had haunted them for years. For several long seconds, they simply stared at it, almost afraid to open it. Their heart was racing faster than ever before. Don't skip. Because what they discovered inside was something they never expected. As they unfolded the first page, they realized it was not an ordinary letter. Every sentence carried emotions that had never been spoken aloud. It revealed how easily misunderstandings had been allowed to grow while the truth remained buried beneath fear and silence. Certain conversations had never happened the way they had been told. Certain decisions had been influenced by people who never truly understood the connection between you both. Piece by piece, the painful puzzle finally began fitting together. The deeper they read, the more tears filled their eyes. They realized that while they had spent years believing they were protecting themselves from more pain, they had actually been protecting a lie that kept two hearts apart. Every page removed another layer of confusion until only one undeniable truth remained: you had never become the enemy they were led to believe. You had simply become the victim of circumstances neither of you fully understood. Your soulmate lowered the letter and covered their face with both hands. For a long time, the room remained completely silent except for the sound of quiet tears. Memories came rushing back with incredible force. They remembered promises that were never fulfilled, conversations left unfinished, and moments when one honest sentence could have changed everything. The weight of those missed opportunities became almost impossible to carry. Don't skip. Because heaven was not finished revealing the truth. The visitor remained standing nearby before finally speaking again. They admitted they had wanted to tell the truth much earlier but had been afraid of the consequences. Fear had kept everyone silent for far too long. But after witnessing your soulmate's growing sadness and realizing how deeply they still loved you, they could no longer carry the burden alone. They knew the truth deserved to be spoken, regardless of how uncomfortable it might be. Those words awakened something powerful inside your soulmate. For the first time in years, regret slowly transformed into determination. Instead of asking why the past had happened, they began asking what could still be saved. They realized that if destiny had allowed the truth to appear now, perhaps it was because the story was not over after all. Perhaps there was still one final opportunity waiting beyond the pain. As dawn approached, your soulmate carefully folded the letter and held it close to their heart. They whispered a quiet promise that they would no longer allow fear, pride, or outside voices to control their future. If even the smallest path toward you still existed, they were ready to walk it with complete honesty. But just as they reached for their phone to take the first real step toward you, the screen suddenly lit up with an unexpected notification. The name they saw was the last person they ever imagined would contact them. And the message began with 6 unforgettable words that instantly changed everything, beloved one. The moment your soulmate read those first 6 words, time seemed to stand still. Their heartbeat quickened, their hands trembled, and for several long seconds they could do nothing except stare at the screen. Those words were simple, yet they carried the power to break years of silence. In that instant, every excuse, every fear, and every wall they had built around their heart began to crumble. They finally understood that destiny had been giving them one last opportunity, not to relive the past, but to face it with honesty. The message did not bring accusations. It did not reopen old wounds with anger. Instead, it reminded them that truth has a way of surviving even the longest seasons of separation. Love that is genuine may become quiet, but it does not disappear simply because time passes. Reading those words filled your soulmate with a mixture of hope and sorrow. Hope, because they realized all was not completely lost. Sorrow, because they understood how many precious moments had slipped away while they remained silent. They closed their eyes and whispered a prayer they had never spoken before. They asked for courage instead of comfort. They asked for wisdom instead of certainty. Most importantly, they asked for one chance to become the person they should have been from the very beginning. In that quiet moment, they stopped blaming circumstances and accepted responsibility for every opportunity they had allowed fear to steal. Don't skip. Because this is the most important part of the message. Heaven often allows people to reach the edge of losing something precious before opening their eyes to its true value. That does not mean every story ends in reunion, nor does it mean every separation lasts forever. It simply means that every heart must eventually choose between living with regret or living with truth. Your soulmate has finally reached that crossroads. The tears they cried were not a sign of defeat, they were the beginning of transformation. As for you, this message is not asking you to wait endlessly or ignore your own peace. Continue becoming stronger. Continue healing. Continue walking the path that brings light into your life. If a connection is truly meant to return, it should return through honesty, respect, and real change, not through empty promises or repeated patterns. The strongest relationships are rebuilt by actions, not by words alone. Meanwhile, unseen pieces are still moving into place. Conversations that once seemed impossible are becoming possible. Hearts that were once closed are beginning to soften. Hidden truths have already started coming into the light, and the silence that separated two lives is no longer as powerful as it once was. What happens next will depend on courage, humility, and the willingness to choose truth over fear. So do not let bitterness become your permanent companion. Let every lesson make you wiser, not harder. The chapter behind you may explain your pain, but it does not have to decide your future. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not that someone comes back, it is that both hearts finally become ready for the kind of love they were unable to protect before. If this fictional story touched your heart, take its message as a reminder to value honesty, communicate openly, and never assume tomorrow is guaranteed. Some opportunities return, and some only teach us why they mattered. May peace guide your heart, wisdom shape your decisions, and hope remain with you as the next chapter of your journey begins.